provide us information with the latest cocaine bust and their efforts in the war on drugs.
Good day and good afternoon, everybody. This press conference is being conducted to address a drug seizure that happened last week, Thursday, May 17, 2018. Also present with me is Special Agent Ed Talbot from the Drug Enforcement Administration. Following a series of information obtained from various sources, both throughout the community and within our law enforcement partners, officers from the Guam Police Department assigned to the Neighborhood Patrol Division, the Criminal Investigations Division, and the Mandania Drug Task Force, along with our federal partners, altogether to date seized approximately 39 pounds or 18 kilograms of the drug cocaine. Specifically for the seizure that occurred last week, Thursday, we seized 35 pounds or 16 kilograms and arrested 6 individuals. Those who were arrested were Robert John Afison, Jonathan Joe Meno Manglonia, Carl Santiago Uggan, Monica Ann Kinata, George Carlos Polino Flores, and John Agfaji Panatongo. To date, last week's Thursday seizure was the largest narcotic seizure of its kind in the history of the Guam Police Department. As we provide this press conference, I want to update you with the street value for this seizure. After consulting with our drug intelligence analysts and working with the Drug Enforcement Administration, it is brought forth that the current value per kilogram of cocaine is estimated at about $55,000 per kilogram. Now this brings that street value of the seizure to about $825,000, and altogether with what was seized prior to that, valued at about $990,000, so close to $1 million. These efforts of the seizure are attributed to the hardworking men and women within the Guam Police Department, as well as our other law enforcement partners, both federal and local. The success of the Mandania Drug Task Force specifically could not have been possible without the assistance and the partnership of certain local law enforcement agencies. Those agencies consist of the Guam Customs and Quarantine Agency, the Department of Corrections, the Guam Airport Authority Airport Division, and the Port Authority of Guam Police Division. We also work very closely with the Drug Enforcement Administration, as well as the Office of Homeland Security Investigations and some of our other federal law enforcement partners. I want to reiterate that the drugs on our island is not just a law enforcement problem. What we do in law enforcement is interdiction. The drugs in the community is exactly that. It's a community issue, and as a community, we must address this issue as it continues to plague our island. Now, to that point, GPD does have several or various education programs for our students as well as adults. Now, because the summer months are upon us, if there are any summer programs that are out there that are interested, we'd be willing to partner with those programs to provide presentations to these students. If there are any businesses out there that want to do some drug abuse training, again, we'd be willing to partner with these agents or with those businesses alongside with our partners like the Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center, the Department of Public Health and Social Services, and the other nonprofit and non-government organizations. As always, we encourage everybody in the community to take an active stance against crime and reporting all suspicious and criminal activities to the appropriate authorities. I urge everyone to get involved in an active neighborhood watch program, and if you're not, to contact your local mayor and inquire how they can take part in joining and forming a watch program in their village. Now, I must tell you that the specifics and the details of the drug cases that were handled, those leading up to what happened last week Thursday and those that happened on Thursday, I am not able to release the specific details to that, as those cases are definitely ongoing, and those who have alleged to have committed these crimes do have their rights. So as not to violate the integrity of this case or the rights of those accused, I must refrain from providing any specific details to those investigations. Now, with that being said, I'd like to turn it over to Special Agent Talbot for his comments from the DEA.
Thank you, Chief Cruz. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Several months ago, Chief Cruz and I engaged in a series of meetings in an effort to create a plan to combat the distribution of illegal drugs on Guam. We're here today as a direct result of our established relationship and operational plan. Through the combining of resources and implementation of local and federal expertise, desired results have and will continue to be achieved. Although I can't comment any further regarding this and other ongoing investigations, we are actively engaged in combating the distribution of illicit drugs as well as diverted prescription drugs on the island of Guam and throughout the northern Mariana Islands. Our goals in any investigation are always to first protect the community, then the protection of our officers that we work with, our task force officers in Task Force Guam, as well as our federal agents. This also deals in the protection and integrity of any investigation that we're engaged in. And finally, the rights of the individuals. I appreciate your time today, and we will continue to work with GPD as well as all the local agencies and federal agencies throughout the region. Thank you very much.
I will end our comments this afternoon by saying that the Guam Police Department and all the local law enforcement agencies do get the support from the governor and the lieutenant governor. As we all know, that Lieutenant Governor Ray Tenorio is the overseer of public safety in the government of Guam, and not just the Guam Police Department, but all those agencies that I mentioned do get full support from Lieutenant Governor Tenorio and Governor Eddie Calvo with regards to this matter. So I will assure you, and I will assure the people of Guam, that it is a collective, collaborative effort throughout the local government as well as our federal law enforcement partners as we continue to combat this issue of drugs, whether it's cocaine, whether it's crystal methamphetamine, or any illegal or illicit drug out in our community.
Chief, can you say whether or not you believe all of these recent cases of cocaine washing up are connected? Is there any evidence to indicate that they are connected?
That is something that, Kevin, we are still taking a look at. I cannot say definitively at this point. What I will tell you is that what was seized was sent off to the DEA laboratory for further analysis, and that's something that we're definitely taking a look at. But I can't say definitively at this point in time until we analyze the drug evidence that has been seized.
Chief, can you give us a sense of what you think the cocaine problem is on Guam and how it compares to what has been the predominant drug of choice here, which is ice?
Well, again, it's. I will tell you that we believe in law enforcement that cocaine is something that's been in our community. We've seen this time and time again. We see a resurfacing of the drug cocaine as it is tied to, as you call it, the drug of choice, crystal methamphetamine. We are still trying to figure out how that is taking an active play in what's happening in our community. So again, I think it would be premature, Nestor, for me to say specifically how cocaine ties to or relates to crystal meth or any of the over-the-counter prescription drugs or any of the drugs that we're dealing with out there, how those all tie together. But that's definitely something we're taking a look at to see how one drug affects the other in the community.
Former Customs and Quarantine Director Jim McDonald had indicated that the seizure of the cocaine found on the shore of Manila, the 4 pounds, and then again the kilo of cocaine found at Anderson Air Force Base are linked to a Chinese shipping vessel. What efforts are being done to increase our maritime borders, the waters? What are you doing with the United States Coast Guard to patrol our borders to make sure and ensure that no further drugs are being dropped in our oceans to be picked up by individuals allegedly like Robert F. Eisen?
Well, I will tell you that we don't have any definitive information that what washed up on our shore came from a Chinese vessel. That is something that we are still taking a look at. We don't know for sure whether it did come from that vessel or any other vessel for that matter. We don't know how it washed up on our shore. That is something that we're taking a look at. There is maritime enforcement, and we are working with the Coast Guard's investigative service to be able to look at what we can do to interdict that. Now, again, we've partnered with the drug enforcement agencies as well as our other law enforcement partners to figure out exactly, or try and figure out exactly, how this washed up on our shore, how this recent seizure came to be and how it's in our community. So as we take a look at that, maritime enforcement is definitely part of the answer to this whole equation of trying to solve this. But again, I want to be clear that we don't know for a fact whether it came from a Chinese vessel. That's something we're taking a look at, and I think we'll be able to figure that out as that drug evidence is analyzed by the DEA. But regardless of whether it was, how it washed up on our shore, whether it was brought here by a vessel, whether it was mailed in through the postal system, or what have you, we are still collaborating with the respective partners to ensure that our borders, we tighten up our borders.
With limited resources in maritime enforcement, what can be done, or actually, as it stands, what are our maritime enforcement efforts? What do they look like at this point? And how can GPD, because I know that GPD does have a maritime enforcement crew itself. What efforts is being done by your crew to ensure or to beef up the security on our waters?
Well, just to be clear, that interdiction at the border, while we do have concurrent jurisdiction, is primarily the function of Guam Customs and Quarantine, working in collaboration with the U.S. Coast Guard. The Guam Police Department does have a maritime, a recreational boating safety section. I want to be clear, the federal funding that has been brought into GPD for that is exactly for that. It's for recreational boating safety, not necessarily maritime enforcement for drug interdiction. However, it doesn't mean that those officers can't go out there and assist Guam Customs and Quarantine and assist the U.S. Coast Guard where assistance is needed. But I just want to be clear that that's the reason for the existence of that section. And as we go forward, again, we're working with Guam Customs and Quarantine, we're working with U.S. Customs and the U.S. Coast Guard, their investigative service, to figure out how we can work better to tighten up our borders at this point in time.
Chief.
I don't have any specifics. I can't speak on behalf of the Guam Customs and Quarantine Agency, but I will tell you that we are coming to the table to figure out how we can interdict drugs coming up on our shores.
Chief, yeah, do you believe that Mr. Ephesian down in Inarahan was the intended recipient of this barrel of cocaine? Or do you believe that he happened on it on the beach?
Again, Kevin, that's something that that's an ongoing investigation. I can't speak specifically to that point. Mr. Afaisin has made his statement, and you've seen that in the magistrate documents. He is, and again, because it's an ongoing investigation, and so as to protect the integrity of that investigation, I am not able to speak specifically to that comment as to whether or not Mr. Afaisin was the intended recipient or not. Again, that's still an ongoing investigation.
Did the barrel show any evidence that it had been in the water, and was it beat up in any way by bashing against the reef or anything?
Again, I don't want to give any specifics about that case. What you saw in the magistrate documents is what we are able to release at this point. Again, this is an ongoing matter, and until we know definitively where we're at with regards to how that came into Mr. Afaisin's possession, I would have to refrain from making any specific comments to that point.
Do you have any preliminary indication of the origin of the cocaine?
At this point, I'm not going to comment on any part of the investigation. Remember, in any investigation, the integrity of that investigation, one, for it to be successful, needs to be maintained, as well as to protect the rights of any individual associated with that investigation.
Of course, our island is surrounded by water, so ensuring that there are checkpoints at all,
Ports of
all
entry.
of our ports of entry is of course a huge task. But we do have two main civilian ports of entry: the Hagatnya Boat Basin and the Agate Marina. What efforts are being done to conduct checks on individuals who leave and dock? what are we doing to ensure that they're not leaving and going out to retrieve something and coming back within something? Do we have a system in place to properly screen these boats that come in and out of our harbors, or are we totally relying on the U.S. Coast Guard?
I would tell you that both the Agana Marina as well as the Agate Marina are under the direct operational control of the Port Authority of Guam. So those port officers there is a mechanism in place where those Port Authority officers have enforcement jurisdiction there. In addition to that, Guam Customs and Quarantine as well does have jurisdiction there. I can't speak on behalf of either of those two agencies, but I will tell you that we do recognize that there are other ports that exist besides the airport and the seaport, and that there are two marinas for smaller vessels to come in. And again, we work with the Port Authority, and I had mentioned that, and we work with Guam Customs and Quarantine. There is a mechanism that's in place, and that's something that we are collaborating with regards to those partners to ensure that the appropriate and the adequate enforcement is there, so as to be able to close up those potential loose ends or those porous parts of our border.
Do you consider the waterways, the harbors, the marinas a more vulnerable access point for drugs than, say, the U.S. Post Office or the airport?
I think the possibility is there, Nestor. I think that one could take a look at that and see that there is a possibility that it could be brought in from those particular points of entry. And again, it's something that we're working with those respective agencies to take a look at. What can be done to include the resources that we have in the Guam Police Department. We're not putting this solely on the U.S. Coast Guard or solely on Guam Customs and Quarantine or the Port Authority of Guam. It's again that collaborative effort, and that's a lot of what we're saying today. We see this big seizure, we're aware of this, and we're definitely doing everything that we can to be able to close up and secure our borders better.
Given the size of the seizures, would you consider this a highly organized drug operation?
I would say that considering the size of this, there is that potential that it could be that. Knowing that there's 39 kilograms that we've come across, in or around 18 pounds, that is a significant amount. We've never seen this single seizure before. This would leave any prudent person to believe that this is somewhat of an organized operation, and that's something, again, without divulging any specific information. This is something we're taking a look at, and that's why we work so closely with the DEA, HSI, and the other federal partners.
Domestic organizations or international?
Oh, that we don't know yet. We're not aware. That's something we're taking a look at.
Has a drug smuggling route been identified through Asia into our island? Are you looking at the possibility? I do know that drug organizations are flaring up in Asia, and new routes are being established to smuggle drugs into the U.S. Has the DEA identified a drug smuggling route which possibly places Guam in that route?
I will say this, the DEA is always attempting to identify transnational criminal organizations. We're in 222 offices domestically, I believe right now in over 70 countries, and that's what we're here to do. Ladies and gentlemen, this is why DEA task forces are created, and our partnerships with the local law enforcement are paramount to our investigations, to our success. It is the development of raw intelligence and making that intelligence become actionable and taking action within our communities. And I think what you see here today is a direct result of that. We've partnered up with the Guam Police Department. We have partnered up with Guam Customs and Quarantine. In answer to your previous question, if I may, Chief Cruz, is when I arrived here about a year ago, my first agenda was to establish a relationship with the United States Coast Guard and Guam Customs and Quarantine, because the maritime component is crucial to any geographical location that is against water. I've worked maritime enforcement. We have agents and task force officers that have worked maritime enforcement, and the focus is there. But the focus is everywhere. The DEA, wherever there are drugs, the DEA will be there. And we will be working with every local law enforcement agency that has a specific mission to combat that and to disrupt and dismantle these organizations that are distributing these drugs.
In your experience, do you see signs here of an international, highly organized drug organization involved in this?
At this point, I'm not going to comment any further regarding that. In respects to this investigation and others, I would say any organization that is pushing that type of weight is significant. This is a significant seizure on Guam. It'd be a significant seizure in Los Angeles or Miami or any other location.
Have you reached out to foreign law enforcement?
No comment.
Do you think it's likely that all of this cocaine that has washed up was intended for Guam alone? Or could it be intended for transshipment elsewhere? Or are you at least investigating that possibility?
We are investigating that. I can't answer definitively who it was intended for, whether its intention was to go somewhere else aside from Guam, but that's all part of the investigation. And again, we cannot comment into any specifics regarding that because there are other facets of the investigation that still need follow-up investigation. So I will tell you, it's all part of the investigation, Kevin, and we're definitely looking into that. But I just want to make it known that several months ago we had 2 kilograms wash up over at Hawaiian Rock and another kilogram wash up on another part of the island, and within a few short months what you find is the seizure of the largest single amount of the drug cocaine in our island. So to that point, that tells you that with the work that's happening with all the local law enforcement agencies as we partner up with our federal agencies, that much work has been done. And that really is our message for the people of Guam today, that we're not sitting idly behind, waiting for things to wash up on our shores. We are actively and very aggressively investigating these cases and doing what we need to do to rid our community of that, hold people accountable.
Should we be
2000
concerned that since, the first 2 discoveries was washed up, they happened to, basically is people came across it, and then you guys found this big haul. Should we be concerned that this is what you guys found?
There must be
There
others.
Yeah,
should
in
be more
2000
stuff out there. Is that a big concern?
In 2000, cocaine sold for $1,000 a gram. And of course, as we all know, the price of any drug is an indicator of the availability of that. So with the current price of cocaine, as related to his question, what does that tell GPD in the amount of cocaine out there in the streets?
If I can answer your question first, Rick, I will tell you, any amount of drugs in our community is a concern to us. I would not put an amount to say that I'm not concerned with that. Residue in an ice pipe is a concern to the Guam Police Department. Whether it's 18 kilograms that we've seized, and I'll tell you, 18 kilograms is significant by any stretch of the imagination. So it is a concern for us, and that's why we're so aggressively addressing this matter, and that's why all our partners are coming together. To answer your question, ma'am, I would say yes. The price point for cocaine on our island is an indicator of what's available out there. So that's why it's very important that we address this matter. And regardless of whether the price point was low, which means there's a vast or a bigger amount on our island, or whether the price point was much higher, indicating that it's possibly lower. Nonetheless, we go after it, and we go after what's out there. Again, this is something that we are still getting our minds wrapped around, but the interdiction and like Agent Talbot has said, the disruption and the dismantling is at the forefront of what we're doing. Regardless of price point, regardless of how much is out there or not out there, we're going after it aggressively.
In 1990, cocaine was limited in availability, and it wasn't as widely used thanks to the operations of GPD and federal law enforcement agencies carrying out successful operations in identifying the key suppliers. Do you think that you guys are on that path to doing that once again? Absolutely.
There's no doubt in my mind. Whether it was the War on Ice campaign back in the early 90s or the efforts of the Mandanya Drug Task Force working collaboratively with the DEA, HSI, and ATF and the rest of them, we're definitely on that path. We're at it again. And we're gonna stick with it this time around. I will assure the people of Guam that, so long as I remain the chief of police and Ed Talbot's in place as the resident agent in charge, this is something that we're going to address aggressively, and not let back in any way, shape, or form.
Chief, you say there's a lot of people working on this. We're working with everybody. So there's a lot of minds that are in this. And you still say that you're still getting your minds wrapped around it. Is it the case that you guys know where the cocaine came from, but you're not able to say it publicly?
Well, I think it's something that we are still trying to, again, the investigation still needs to take its course. Now,
Do you have an idea of where it came from?
I can't comment specifically to that point, because
You can't comment publicly?
until the drug analysis comes back and we know specifically what we're dealing with, I think it'd be premature, Jasmine, to make any specific comments. It'd be very erroneous on my part, definitely premature, to make any kind of comment to its origin, absent the absence of the drug analysis. So,
So the drug analysis will say at least where it came from.
it would lead us to, it could potentially lead us to where it came from. Absent that, Jasmine, I will tell you, I can't comment to that.
You'll tell us when you know, though, right?
As soon as I'm able to release that kind of information, what information is releasable, I will definitely inform the public.
Agent Talbot, can you say, have you called for assistance, for additional resources, for additional manpower? Or Chief, have you asked for additional resources or manpower to come assist with this problem?
Kevin, I can say this, and I think I can elaborate, Ernest, on your previous question, and this may help Jasmine as well, is the DEA is utilizing every resource available to it. Plain and simple.
In this case?
In all cases. Every case we conduct, we utilize every resource and capability that we have. I can tell you this, ladies and gentlemen, with partnering up with GPD and other local and federal law enforcement entities on the island and even in the Marianas, the game has changed. We're now in a situation, drug dealer beware. We're here, you see the results of something that has happened, and we also implore the public, if you have information, please contact us. Your information is confidential. It will be kept confidential, but if there's a concern about drugs on the island of Guam, be a participant. Assist us, be an active community member, and we will take care of the rest. Yes.
Okay.
So you can't discuss how many additional resources have been brought in, or how many more men or agents have been called in as a result?
Well, I will say this, the Drug Enforcement Administration is a large and vast organization throughout CONUS and outside CONUS, and we are utilizing every resource we have.
Kevin, to that point, within the Guam Police Department and definitely within the Mandanya Drug Task Force, we're using, considering that there are other parts of the department that I need to manage accordingly. I still have patrol operations and the rest of the department, but make no mistake that this is something that we prioritize. We put this at the forefront of what we're doing. And again, it's the entire department, the entire task force working collaboratively, and we are pulling every available resource to be able to deal with this.
Going back to the price, so it's $825K for 35 pounds.
Yes, so for that last seizure of 35 pounds just last week, it's about $825,000. When you factor in what we seized prior to that, collectively altogether, we seized about 39 pounds or 18 kilograms, which equates to about $990,000.
So about breaks down to about
In around the
$50
ballpark of $50,000 to
gram.
$55,000 per kilogram.
per gram.
Per kilogram.
What is it per gram?
Well, again, I'm not a math major. I
Dang,
apologize.
that's why I'm asking.
Yeah.
I was a law major. Shout out to you, OG.
Yeah, so
Is it
Well, okay, so I did the
significantly
math and
down,
it
or-
breaks down.
again, when you take a look at the price point, there are many factors to be taken into consideration. Where it originated from, that again, we are not definitive of. But where it originated from, the route it took to get here, all that gets factored into, and that's why we say that's an approximate value, depending on where it came from, how it got here, what resources were spent, and it's in that ballpark based on our intelligence, drug intelligence analysts, that's the ballpark it places it in at this
Would
point
you
in time.
say that if GPD notices a rise in the cost of cocaine per gram, that your efforts are working to minimize or lessen the amount of cocaine out on the streets?
I think there's a direct correlation, yes, absolutely. The amount, the price per kilogram or gram for that matter, whatever that equates to, Jasmine, if that amount goes up, then obviously GPD is doing something right. If the price continues to drop, then that could be an indicator that that maybe there's more of it out on the street. And again, there are so many variables that add into that, so it'd be premature for me to say that there's a direct correlation one way or the other, because there's so many different variables that play into that. So I would say from a general standpoint that yes, one could correlate one to the other. Yeah.
Oh, you
Okay.
said that the drug was the approximate value of how it got here and all that stuff. Is that, but I thought it was a street value. Is that the approximate street value?
Approximate street value,
825K?
yes,
Okay.
that's what we're looking at.
Chief, and finally, can you definitively say that more arrests are pending?
I will tell you that, again, that's all dependent on the investigation. I can't say one way or the other. As the investigation takes its course, I'll be able to say that one way or another. Again, it would be premature for me to say that there are any future arrests directly related to what happened on Thursday or those seizures prior to that. But again, the investigation continues.
Is Randall Fulcher and Jimmy Fison still being investigated by GPD?
We can't, I asked you guys, we're not gonna comment or
Yeah,
ask
I
any more
can't talk
Well, I
questions.
just noticed
specifically.
they weren't.
Yeah,
they
so
weren't charged.
again, to protect the interests of in the interest of fair justice and everything, we're not gonna expand or make any comments towards that.
What
Just to be
color was
clear,
the
the
barrel?
price of cocaine has gone down by comparison based upon those numbers? Is
Why
it?
not?
Or are you able to say?
Well, I know in 2000 it was $1,000.
Well, I would tell you that what we see right now is, that's what our drug intel analyst is telling us.
That it's gone down?
That's where it's at this point, yes. That the price of cocaine right now,
Where is
the
that?
street value for what's on the island of Guam is that $50,000 to $55,000 per kilogram. As far as it going down, I mean, that would mean that there's a relative point that it's attached to. So that again is when I talk about we're still trying to get our minds wrapped around what exactly we're dealing with. Cocaine on our streets is something that's relatively new. We've known that it's been out there, but this spike or this surge of cocaine in the community is something that we're still trying to understand completely. So I would tell you that I am not able to tell you whether it's gone down or it's gone up. What I can tell you is based on price points from where we see around the world, we think that based on intelligence, that the price of kilogram on our streets now it's between that mark.
And how does that compare with other jurisdictions? High, low?
Again, it depends on where it came from, where it originated from, and the resources that were spent to bring the drug cocaine to that particular area. So again, there's so many different variables that are part of this, to answer your question definitively, and all those variables need to be taken into consideration.
I'm just wondering if 55,000 a kilo in Hawaii, for example, or California, is that what it goes for? I don't know.
Well, I can comment on this, ladies and gentlemen. There is street value and there's wholesale value, and the price point between the two continually shift between the ease and difficulty in the distribution route. And that's about the extent of a comment I'll make on that, but it clearly aligns with the paradigm of macroeconomics.
What color was the barrel?
We can't comment on that, Jasmine.
Was it blue?
It's still part of the investigation.
Again, I can't comment to the specifics of the
I asked you
case,
guys.
Jasmine. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay? All right.
That's it.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time, and again, I urge the community, please, if you see something, say something, bring it to GPD's attention, bring it to any authority's attention, so that we can investigate it accordingly. Thank you very much.
Or co-parent stoppers.
Or co-crime stoppers. Thank you.
Do you want me to do something?
Thank you. Thank you guys, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate your cooperation. Thank you so much for being kind. Good job, guys. And your questions as we go here.
All right. So there you have it. We just finished a news conference with Guam Police Department Chief of Police J.I. Cruz and an agent from the Drug Enforcement Administration. What they told us was that there has been approximately $1 million worth of cocaine seized in the past week. They would not comment specifically on the arrest so as not to taint their ongoing investigation. They did say that they are working closely with the Coast Guard and the Guam Customs and the port because apparently much of the cocaine, the drug that has been seized, came in on barrels that floated onto shore. They would not say specifically or would not comment specifically on how that might have been washed up or if it came from a vessel or what type of vessel or any identification of that sort. They also say that they are continuing the investigation. They wouldn't say if any arrests were pending. They wouldn't also say if they were able to reach out to international law enforcement organizations to verify if there was some ongoing activity there. But they did say that these arrests may be just the beginning and that the price of cocaine is about $55,000 per kilogram. They wouldn't say how that compares to other jurisdictions because there are different variables, different factors involved in the price. So there you have it. We'll have a full report tonight on KUAM TV.